Chapter 4. Trailer Trash. I like to say that I am from the good side of the trailer park. People think that's a funny statement. The people who never lived in a trailer park do anyway. But if you've had the good or bad fortune to spend a little time in a single or double wide, you know why that statement is true. No matter how far down the ladder of success you are, there is always someone a rung or two lower than you who's going to help you feel better about yourself and your lot in life. My mom was proud that we weren't like those hoodlum kids with no manners, who lived a few trailers away from us. Kids who didn't take baths and whose parents were in and out of prison. Never mind that Mom was sending us to the grocery store to buy candy with our government food stamps so she could buy a pack of cigarettes with the 90 cents in change we brought home. Or that she had us drive her car to the bootleggers to buy beer for her, even though I was only 14, didn't have a driver's license, and our car didn't have tags, insurance, or brakes most of the time. There are many different levels of poor. The best kind, I think, is the version I experienced. The kind where you're poor, but you don't really realize it at the time. It never occurred to me that we had it bad, and that other people, other kids in particular, had it much better than us. I don't know why, it just didn't. I don't even remember being jealous of the kids on the school bus who were picked up in front of the nice houses in the towns where we lived, or the clothes they wore, or the cars their parents drove. Those feelings didn't come until much later. After high school, actually. I was just happy to be. I had a drawer with a pair of pants and 3 shirts in it and a pair of old cowboy boots. What else did I need? We didn't always live in trailers. My brothers Joe and Blaine and sisters Marcy and Candy and I, we lived in houses too, in apartments with aunts and uncles and friends. We didn't just move from town to town. We fled from state to state. Mom would do the best she could with what she had, but sometimes that wasn't enough. We'd find ourselves packing up and leaving in the middle of the night so our landlord couldn't catch us and demand the 3 months of back rent that was due. When I was in the 10th grade, I came home from school one day to find that my Aunt Mary had come to visit. She and Uncle Rod had recently moved to Kentucky and were doing pretty well there. So when I arrived home that afternoon, I found Mom and Aunt Mary walking through the house with a stranger. They were looking at our furniture and the stuff in our bedrooms. When I asked Mom what was going on, she said, "We're moving." I asked her, "When?" And she said, "Tonight." Late that evening, we loaded everything we could fit into Mom's '74 Plymouth Duster and climbed in the back seat, with Aunt Mary navigating as Mom, smiling as she smoked her Winston Red, with the wing window cracked, steered the car east for the latest new and better life that awaited in Kentucky. The rest of our belongings were sold to the auctioneer for $300, and in time it was a better life, and it was always a better life. The government apartment complex in Atchison, Kansas was better than my uncle's basement where we lived in Brownsville, Nebraska. And the green trailer in someone's backyard in Greenville, Kentucky was better than the little house at Sugar Lake, Missouri that we packed up and moved from that night in 10th grade. Though they weren't always better places to live, they were part of a better life to live. I don't think I knew it at that time, but I do now. It isn't about the house, it's about the home, and we're always trying to make one, find one. My mom just wasn't good at it. She did come from a good home, so it made it kind of tougher to figure out how to provide one for her children. Most of the time we didn't mind moving, we were used to it. We got to meet new kids and see new parts of the country. Sometimes it was a family reunion, like when we moved back in with Uncle Rod and Aunt Mary and their kids from time to time. We were just glad to see each other. There's only one place that I wish we hadn't left. A small town in Kansas called Highland. We got there when I was in 4th grade and stayed until the middle of my 7th grade year. It was like something out of a movie. At least in my memory it was. All of us kids feel the same way. We love that time and we wish we could have stayed and grown up there. My class had only 17 kids in it. I don't remember a single name of the 100 kids I graduated with in high school in Kentucky, but I still remember everyone's name from my classroom in Highland. I remember those details vividly. What the streets looked like as I skateboarded down, how a marathon candy bar tasted as you stood on the sideline, freezing at a junior high football game, and how Tina Scott played guitar in our music class that day. She was only 9 or 10, but when she played and sang, I was mesmerized. I remember the smell of the gum in the football card collections sold at Ucana's hardware store and the feel of the tennis ball coming off my racket at the courts near 5th Street. That court is gone now, as are most of the houses we lived in when we were there. I've gone back to Highland many times. I still do. It somehow feels like home to me. I was there only about 3 years, but they were the best 3 years of my life. The truth is, I've spent my life trying to recreate one particular moment from when we were living there. We had rented an old farmhouse out in the country, which had a couple of old barns and a corn crib. Just down the lane was a creek where a bridge had collapsed, placing our house at the end of a dead-end road. I caught 1,000,000 bullhead catfish and swam in 1,000 swimming holes in that creek. Everything is bigger in those memories for me, exaggerated, probably because it was such a good time for our family. My mom and dad were back together at least for a few months or so, and we were a family. It was 1974, I think. Some of my memories of that time aren't completely clear. They're blurry, come and go, but they're very strong, like the image of the number 38 on the top of a birthday cake that Dad was blowing out, Mom cooking fried chicken in the kitchen, Dad playing guitar on the couch, me sitting beside him, and him teaching me to keep time by tapping on the front of the guitar as he sang Jim Reeves' Distant Drums. I remember a 55 or 56 Chevy in the driveway, and forts being built in cornfields, a dog named Nooper that could climb the tree in the front of the house, and hours of going through the Sears and Roebuck catalog, carefully picking out Christmas gifts that would never come. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers pajamas I had at the top of my list. At that house, at that time, anything was possible. I remember the smell of Ben Gay and the feel of football pads in the locker room underneath the stage at the end of the gym, and lacing up my first pair of Converse All-Star tennis shoes. They were blue and white, the Highland Blue Streaks colors, the color of my school, my town. I remember the sounds in the huddle as our quarterback John Paul Twombly called the play and told the receivers to get open. Then he looked at me, signaling that he was going to throw it to me, his best friend who played tight end. I was one of the best players on the basketball and football teams, and the prettiest girl liked me, or at least I thought maybe she did. I felt like I was somewhere that I needed to be. But then we moved, first to town, then across town, then finally far away. And I had to say goodbye to that place, to those people. I hated doing that. It's strange to say, but I never had a harder time saying goodbye than then, until this past year, when I had to say goodbye to my wife. That town meant that much to me. I don't think my mom knew what it meant to me, to my brothers and sisters, or she didn't care, or more likely didn't feel she could do anything to change it. By then, Dad had left her again, many more times actually, in his usual creative way, with alibis and lipstick on his shirt, or a brick through the front window of Mom's car. I remember hunkering down on the house on 5th Street one night as Dad and Mom yelled and screamed, and he grabbed his half-empty whiskey bottle and slammed the door and left us. It wasn't enough for him to leave us. He had to maim us, make it so that Mom was out of options. And pretty soon, she'd pull out some black trash bags and carefully fill them like fine suitcases with everything we own. We'd get picked up by an aunt or uncle and move on. But part of us stayed behind, especially in Highland. It was too late, without realizing it. Deep roots had grown into that soil. And though in the years to come I might have been living in Avaco, Michigan, or stationed in El Toro, California, a part of me was still back there in that little town. Why do you think I live in an old 1870s farmhouse now, or drive a 1956 Chevy, or play guitar and write songs and stories about small town life? It's all part of getting back there, finding my way back to that place in my head when everything was good, everything was right. And if it's true that we can't ever really go back, we find a way to bring the past into our future. At least that's what I did. It's what I think I'm still doing. Not on purpose, it just happened without me even noticing it. I woke up one day and realized that I have subconsciously spent my entire adult life trying to get back to that one moment in my childhood that I loved most.